Thank you, Chair. Thank you, the organizers. I'll try to be brief and try to finish in 15 minutes time because
Yes.
number of speakers are there. I think just to introduce first the kind of work we do. Our organization, Rights and Risk Analysis Group, basically analyzes the risk which arise out of conflicts or potential conflicts. So our main task is in a way to identify the trends and where possible issue early warnings to the state parties, non-state parties, civil society groups, so that they could understand the emerging threats in a way. Sometimes when people try to make their history, what are the pitfalls of these emerging conflicts. So it will be like any other company when they undertake a particular project. Of course, you have to do risk analysis. I don't think there is any company anywhere in the world which invests somewhere without doing some kind of risk management or risk analysis prior to the investment. So the state has to invest in it, society has to invest in it, and that's where I think we come from. And this whole idea of golden triangle, which I was referring to, I actually have started speaking a little bit sometime in 2024 after the collapse of the Burmese government, and after 79 years after the independence, which nobody had noticed, is the fact that the government of Myanmar, the military junta, the control of the Burma community on the entire country had collapsed. So it's not a failed state, it's a collapsed state. So obviously Burma will have its own consequences, but the challenge is what are the consequences for the neighboring communities, and its neighbors are actually only China and India, and in some parts it's Bangladesh, which is the Chittagong Tracts region where many of the communities live, including the Chakmas. I think whenever we talk about conflict and risk and the failed states, what usually comes to our mind is that it's Somalia in the 1990s. Then of course, as some of the countries collapsed all over Africa, as well as in the Middle East, some of which were created by the Western interventions, whether it's Sierra Leone, Libya, Liberia, Afghanistan, Syria, and at this point in time, Yemen. I mean, I think we have to understand what are the features of these failed states. And I would say, I think the oldest failed state is actually Myanmar. Because Myanmar, the Burma people never controlled the territories which they were given. They had been facing conflict with the ethnic groups from the beginning itself, and they continue to take place. If you talk to an official from the UNHCR, whenever you say somebody is facing persecution, then they get a little bit wary because for how long you continue to suffer. And people often forget that it's not the Rohingyas who were first thrown out of that country. The first people who were thrown out of that country in 1963 were the Indians, and the Nepalis or the Hindus as part of the Burmanization of the country by Ne Win once he took over. So one of the features which became quite well known in Burma was in the 80s and 90s when Golden Triangle became very famous. And Khunsa was the leader, the drug lord, and Golden Triangle consisted of basically parts of Laos, Thailand, and Burma. So the Golden Triangle almost became the most well-known drug trafficking point. You could see so many Hollywood movies, and of course now they are after the situations in Somalia and other failed states. You get to see those stories being made into films. But the original failed state was Myanmar, and the Golden Triangle was the reason. And what are the key features of this kind of failed states? I think features, of course, you see number of definitions, basically collapse of the modern state, the government losing control or not exercising control. But what usually are seen by the neighboring countries, they basically see exodus of population, refugees. So that's why you would see Thailand always, in a way, had seen refugees all the time. And in fact, there are so many agencies working on the refugees for donkeys years, much before even I joined the civil liberties movement. Then you see human trafficking, because people are in a desperate situation. You see lots and lots of drug trafficking, and at a certain point of time, when you have this exodus of population and people are settling there, then you have the conflicts between the locals and those who have settled, even if they belong to the same community, because there are conflicts over resources. A person who has been trafficked or who has sought some kind of shelter, if they are in large number, they would in a way offer their services at a lower rate than the local communities are offering. And then it leads to immediate conflict. And anybody who has followed it, although they at this point in time, I think Mizoram has the largest number of Chin refugees. After the collapse of the Slow Rock State Law and Order Restoration Council in 1989, when the Chins had come to Myanmar, the original people, the Chins who had come were welcome, but at certain point in time, the Chin National Front as well as the YMA, we are having problems because of these issues. So I think what I wanted to highlight, and I have been highlighting for the last 1 year, is that the Burmese government has collapsed. It has collapsed to an extent, if somebody knows Burma, they will never gain the territories. So the government of India at this point in time doesn't have an interlocutor on the other side of the border. So from up north in China till the Chittagong Tracts region and the Chittagong region of Bangladesh, the counterparts of the government of India are the insurgent groups. So whether it's the Arakan Army, Chin National Front, Kachins or anybody. So you do not have a counterpart. And we see sometimes in the newspapers that some of the groups are coming and discussing, holding discussions with the government of India. In fact, a couple of weeks back, Reuters had broken a story saying that Kachins wanted to discuss with the government of India about the rare earths material which they have, because they do not want to sell on to the Chinese. And obviously, they are the only authority which exists there that the government of India pragmatically or with a pragmatic approach has to engage with them. Now, the situation which we have in Burma is very simple. The Burmese government are under control. They are not going to take control over these territories. And I was telling some of my colleagues here that it's simply because the Burma community has not spread into these lands of the Shans, Kachins, Arakan or Chins, etc. So once these armed groups have taken control over the territories, the Burmese military simply doesn't have the numerical community strength to take over the territories. They do not have local support, because the local communities have always been fighting with the Burmese. So what would be the consequences? I think the consequences would be, we all have already seen certain amount of influx. I think more than that is the kind of drug trafficking which is taking place. Because if you look at Burma today, because the Burmese government doesn't control the territories, basically it has been formed into some kind of a barter economy, because the currency is very limited. Then of course wars are very expensive. Just at the end of the day, if you have 40,000 armed cadres, 30,000 armed cadres, and now to rapidly attacks by the Burmese army, you obviously require enormous amount of funds. So where do you bring these funds? Because you cannot tax your population. Taxing population because they are already impoverished, there is no economy running, so where do you run? So obviously, I mean, if you look at Afghanistan, if you look at Burma in the beginning, of course, drug has to be one of the key factors. And if you look at the drug seizures, which is launched by the government of Israel, Operation Jericho, each time I think I was just searching the newspapers that you could see that 20 crores drug, 10 crores drug, 15 crores drug being seized by the Assam Rifles. So what we know is basically what is being captured. What we do not know is what is not being captured. And captured part is very, very small portion of the territory. So it has implications on the entire Northeast. And these implications, if we do not understand today, if our state, the society, the communities, civil society groups are not aware, I think the consequences will be felt 15 years down the line. So what I became concerned about is the kind of impact even it has on a smaller community like the Chakmas. Because the Chakma population in India is only 225,000 as per the 2011 census. But we always have been hearing news stories that a particular armed group, which is headed by the Chakmas in the Chittagong tracks, which operates in India, in Mizoram and Tripura especially, which is known as the Parvata Chittagram Janasamati Samiti. All of you must have heard in the past about the Shanti Bahinis. They themselves being involved in drug trafficking, and it is headed by a person who heads the Chittagong Tracks Regional Council in Bangladesh. Then I started the research. Then research in the beginning did not lead anywhere. Then in the last couple of months, the news stories started featuring that Chakmas being arrested in Mizoram and Tripura with drugs. And what drew my attention was that on 19 June, 10 crore rupees drug was captured from 2 young Chakma boys. Now, out of this 225,000 people, 10 crore, possibly you could buy the entire community. Who are the owners of these drugs? Obviously, the Mizos will not require the Chakmas to, transport these drugs. Then obviously it's being sold out somewhere, consumed somewhere, being sold. Then of course, then if you look at the stories in the other side of the border, which is government drugs, then you could see sometimes Burmese cigarettes being seized. Then I realized later on that actually what is seized is a small part of the drugs, so that there is an arrangement with the Bangladeshi security forces. The expensive drugs you can take them, then you give the certain cheap drugs to the security forces, then the security forces show that they have captured drugs, so it serves the purpose of both these communities. And what we have seen is that I started doing this research just to substantiate. Then I found out from the websites of the district courts. If you go to the district courts all over the country, because digitalization is there, the orders you could read them. Then I found out that 11 Chakmas were arrested in the last 1.5 years. And these are the cases pending before the Ideal District Court as well as Lunglei District Court. And I have not found in the Saya District Court. So obviously the poor Chakmas in Mizoram, they are not the one who are the owners of this drug. They are mere couriers. And we have seen across the world that the couriers do not know anything, and those who are poor, economically disadvantaged, they are always, used and abused because they go through the harsher sentencing. Because if you possess certain amount of drugs for which can be used for commercial purposes, the sentence is at least 10 years or 20 years. And if you read the stories of indigenous peoples in Latin America, you will see across Colombia, across Mexico, the drug cartels use the indigenous women, and they call them mules. And if you read the stories in the Economist written a couple of years back, if you do research, you would find how indigenous communities are being used for drug trafficking. And this situation in Northeast India and Chittagong is not the same. And you would find these indigenous communities are being used. And I think the most dangerous part is that those who are involved in this drug trafficking possibly belong to the community. Because at the end of the day, if it's an armed group doing, in one hand he has a political face representing the community. So he is regarded well in the society. So nobody can question him. Everybody is scared of him in the society. But on the other hand, they carry out these criminal activities. And the final point which I wanted to mention is, now look at the situation of the Chakmas in the Chittagong tract or India. The mainstream Chakmas are in Bangladesh. And the smaller communities, Chakmas, have been this part of the world in India. From the British years, periods or much before the Tripura, Mizoram, we share the same borders. Now, the last point, which should be very much concerning, is that this Bangladeshi armed group, which is involved in drug trafficking, nobody knows in India. It doesn't even make news. And when you talk about the Burma and its implications in the Northeast, you actually do not even include Chittagong nutrients. You only see the Northeastern, 7 Northeastern states, without realizing that the another hills which had fallen on the other side, that's the Chittagong nutrients. So this is headed by somebody called Santu. He was the leader of this insurgent group called Parvata Chittagram Janasanghata Samiti. They ran an insurgency movement from 1975 and then signed an agreement in 1997. They returned back from India, etc. And he is from 1997 till today the chairman of the Chittagong Nutrix Regional Council created by the government of Bangladesh. From 1998 till today, he has been kept as the chairman of the Regional Council without elections. When elections are to be held for every 5 years, he holds the rank of the Minister of State. But at the same point of time, you have not seen anywhere in the world, even in the failed states, that he is allowed to actually have an armed group which operates in Arakan region, which operates in Mizoram, which operates in Tripura, in the border areas, because the border is porous. Imagine this situation in Bangladesh. Every political leader in Bangladesh from 1997 till today, Prime Minister, Army Chief, Chief Justice Sharad Sinha, everybody had to flee, but this guy is still here. Hasina had fallen. She is living in Delhi, possibly next door to close to us, where we are speaking. But this guy still the chairman of the CSC Regional Council. And which is the number one enemy country of Bangladesh today? It is India. At least so long Dr. Yunus is there. And that Chakma is allowed to keep his armed group in the enemy country of Bangladesh. And the government of Bangladesh even doesn't take actions. So you could see the complicity of this. So I think we are in a situation, it's not naive geopolitical issues. There are proxy wars which are coming up. So if the government of India doesn't understand these issues, if the communities do not understand the issues, we will find possibly the government of Bangladesh, government of Pakistan, and all other actors who have interest in Bangladesh, Burma, and the Northeast India, they will be using this person. So, and the first victim would be the Chakmas, because when you carry drugs you not only export it, you also find local consumers. So who would be the first consumers? The first consumers would be the Chakmas in Tripura, in Mizoram, in the Chittagong tract. So that's why I think when you talk about the Burmese situation, the new Golden Triangle, entire Burma has become the Golden Triangle. It's not only the parts of Burma close to Thailand, it is Northeast India, in the Chittagong tracts, and I would say that in the next 15 years down the line, we might have a situation, you have seen Ulta Punjab, it could be worse situation, and because it is in the peripheries, it usually is not the focus of the government, then of course the consequences will be severe. It's not the human trafficking, it's not the exodus of the refugees which poses threat. It's the drug trafficking which will destroy the entire communities simply because drug has become so affordable that you can take a shot with 300 rupees, a laborer earns possibly 600 rupees. He can take one shot, he doesn't even feel hungry, can go to work next day. So that's the risk which is going to come. And I don't think if we are feeling the pinch with 225,000 population, the other communities will also face the same situation. And that's what the risk is all about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for another very important presentation, because the Northeast states being surrounded by different countries. So what is happening in Myanmar or what is happening in Bangladesh will always have different kinds of implications in the Northeastern states. So the sir has very elaborately highlighted the issues and the concerns.